Go. Alright, welcome back to Nick Lenz's Comic Corner, Classic Lessons, Known Classics. This is episode number 3480, Doubleshot number 3374. Got a DC trade and a Dark Horse trade. First in DC, now I've never reviewed any of these trades before for this particular trade series. We have DC Finest Superboy, the Superdog from Krypton. You're like, this is interesting. Yeah. Costs as much as a Marvel Epic Collection. Though I got it for a discount. So, here's what the thing collects. Yeah, the whole thing with DC Finest. Now, what I heard when this initiative, the whole thing was launched, maybe 2 years ago, I think it was. And do you know who spearheaded this initiative? You know who was in charge of it? I think he still is. Mark Waid. Yes, the whole idea of DC's Finest is that it is the sister series to Marvel Epic Collection. Similar to the case which Showcase Presents being a sister series to Marvel Essential Marvel. So, as far as I can tell, this character, Superboy, this of course is not Connor, and it's not John, it's Clark Kent as Superboy. Now, this era for Superboy mostly had only been collecting stuff for Legion of Superheroes and one or two standalone trades. There's an anniversary book, but that's been it. This is kind of the first proper one per se. Now you're probably thinking, is this early stories? Kind of, yes, but it's definitely the Silver Age. And this book covers time period of April 1954, and we wrap up in September of 1955. So, collected here is Adventure Comics, the Superboy stories, 199 to 216, along with Superboy issues 33 to 43. And the writers are, that's credited here, well, yeah, Kurt Swan doing a lot of the artwork here. The first credited writer is not Adventure Comics 201, where it's Idle Bender. Yep, Idle Bender, he's one of the writers here. He isn't the only one. You think, okay, who else writes these stories? Well, a lot of them are basically unknown. Aside from Idle Bender, it's Bill Finger. Yes, the co-creator Batman working on this stuff. He ain't working on some of the stories here. I think he works on some Legion stuff as well. But most people also, you have Kurt Swan do the artwork. You have Jerry Coleman does issue 40 for Superboy. Adventure Comics 212. So, mostly put, in the case of 199, it's a story. By the way, these are full Superboy stories. It's not the entire issue, no. It's like I said, it says stories. It is just Superboy. The whole thing with the Superboy stuff in here, it's basically the adventures of Clark Kent as a teenager with superpowers. Something Crossover was completely wiped out of existence. But they brought it back recently with by Mark Waid. In the pages of Action Comics. So, most of the party have Superboy fighting another kid like himself. And there's a bunch of, obviously Silver Age hijinks this one. With giant hands. And then 200, Superboy versus Superboy dealing with apes. Yes, Silver Age drawing apes, mind you. Adventure Comics was kind of in a way similar to the case with Superman with Action Comics and Superman and Batman Detective. It's basically his anthology book. But it wasn't necessarily his first one. He initially started with more fun comics with issue 101. He left issue, I think it was 107, I think it was. And the rest of the book was basically a comedy book. Similar Adventure Comics, basically, what they did is they practically just any feature prior to, I think it was 102, I think it was, were all dropped. The only one they kept was actually Shining Knight. because from what I can tell, everybody else who had a feature in this in Adventure Comics prior to issue 103, all were dropped, all discontinued. So, yeah. So we have Apes, Jungle Base Venture, and then now we're on to Superboy, issue 33 for Superboy, where now also these Superboy issues will actually have backup stories in here too, so we get a chance to explore that. Those of you curious, so do they have the first appearance of Legion here? No. No, they do not. So then we have a Superboy with a small alien from space. Lyle Lang is a featured character in these issues because Superboy stuff introduced Lyle Lang, Pete Ross, basically Smallville itself. Also had a teenage Superboy dealing with a teenage Lex Luthor. Yes. So basically the crows and a bunch of other stuff, and then 201 Festival Line kind of finds out Clark Kent is Superboy, and he gets along fine in the book with basically Lana's father. And then we move over to back Adventure Comics, where you have a Superboy City and it's the obsessed with Superboy. It's a nice standalone issue. And then we have, get this, we have Superboy 34, where the opening story is basically Superboy trying to dance with Lana Lang. Because, of course, in the Superboy stories, Lana Lang was his primary love interest. As Superman, Lana Lang is not his love interest. Well, briefly in the Bronze Age it was, but a lot of the time it's normally been just Lois Lane. Yep. So, yeah, all about marching band stuff, and then Superboy basically deals with a rocket. It's in the same story here. And then Superboy just plays with the Boy Scouts. Yep. Well, a boys' camp, mind you. Like, okay, camping issue. Not a bad idea to do. I'll stop some criminals. And then basically so then, of course, basically we have the Superboy 35, where basically the whole thing is like, oh, Superboy is a dog catcher for a story. Okay. Kind of similar with Superman, where he joined the army for like about a month for like one issue, then he basically rose in really quickly. So, yeah, it's a really fun issue. And we have him being the Oracle, where he picks a wire to put out a fire. It's quite interesting what it is. Like, the thing about these stories here, aside from the fact that it's just the Silver Age hijinks stuff, you're probably thinking, like, is there anything really big, important happen here? Well, we're going to soon get to that, because we do have one very important character who does debut in this book. Oh, excuse me. Excuse me, it just hasn't happened yet, per se. So, the opening story for Superboy 35 is... the whole thing is like Superboy souvenirs. It's like all the objects Superboy gathers up. It's interesting what it was. And back up in the second story is basically Superboy's sister, where he had to briefly pose as member of the Lang family for a story. Okay. And then we have a guy called an Iron Mask who knows that Clark Kent is Superboy. He has to do what he wants, but it turns out the mask was nobody. Actually, it was Pa Kent. Yep. And then we have basically Journey the Second Superboy issue 205, where just Superboy with this kid who's an alien who pops with this. No, it's not Mon-El. It's a completely different character. It's a okay issue, and then pretty much he goes back home. And then moving on to Adventure Comics 206, where basically Superboy deals with the animals. While working with Professor Lang in this issue. Professor Lang is, of course, Lana Lang's father. Yep. Yeah, and the 3 to 5 death. Yeah, it's all about people trying to survive basically a death experience. That's all it kind of was. And we have Clark Kent prisoner. Yeah, held prisoner for a whole story. We can't do much of anything. Eventually, he's able to spook them out. Thanks to him as using his powers to move the house long enough for him to change his costume, burrow a hole outside, and catch criminals. They have Thaddeus Long basically solves weather with the help of Superboy. Yep. You're like, okay. Oh, by the way, you know the fact it's a Silver Age because you have a giant frickin' shovel. Because it's a Silver Age. And then we have Superboy helping out a full player because he's the worst athlete. And that's kind of the story itself. And then we have meets Bongo, public champ number 1. Yeah. So opening story where Superboy participates in a magic trick. And then we have see through the eyes of Superboy. Basically, it's all about every scene from Superboy's perspective. And then we have a weightlifting competition between Superboy and a chimp. And who wins? Nobody to draw. And then we have Rip Van Smallville. Rip Winkle of Smallville appears in 208. Yeah, it's basically Rip and Winkle in a Superboy story, because why not? And then we have Superboy Week. Yes, where we have a parade. Yeah, held for Superboy Week. Show the fact Superboy is awesome. And then we move on to Superboy 39. The Boy Tycoon of Smallville. You think, is this Lex? No, it's not Lex. Just some other kid who pops up for this one story. It's very interesting. And they have the Great Krypton Hunt. Yes, we have a Superboy being affected by Krypton. Because of course he can't be. Yeah. The boy with Superboy's powers. Yeah, a kid steals Superboy's powers for a story because of course he would. And finally reached 210. The debut of Krypto the Superdog. Yep. That's one historical thing we have here is debut of Krypto the Superdog. Where basically it's kind of like a noble dog who just happens to have powers. That was later retconned he came Krypton. Then he decided to go back to space. And then we have in Superboy 40. Yeah, it's a weird, it's like, oh, boy of clay. Where Superboy's losing his powers. And of course he tries to do something, but can't do much. It's like, his power is a weakening. Is it kryptonite per se? What is it, might ask? Protein! Yep, he needs protein. Well, potassium mostly with bananas. And then we have the whole school of geniuses thing, because why not have a story involving geniuses? They have Lana protected by magic necklace in the third story here. Still a little bit of time here. And then we have Lois Lane pop up in issue 211. Yep, Lois Lane. The future wife of Superman. Yes. Well, it seems like the story here, it's like, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a weirdest issue where Superboy is like flash forward and flash back, and that's all that was. And we have Superboy's Robot Twin, issue 212. Because, okay. Why not? Robot Superboy. And then we have issue 41, Pa Kent's Dilemma. And then we have Superboy me, a Native American Indian. Which, of course, anybody sees like, oh, this is a stereotype? Not really. I believe these Native Americans, this should be pretty decent people. They're not terribly written. They're fine. It's the people who are not Native Americans basically written to be terrible, which is fine. And then we have the Junior Sleuth of Smallville. It's a basically Superboy helping some detectives. Because why not? We have Pa Kent's Dilemma. It's a Pa Kent story. All the Super Kent stuff. And then we have Superboy participating in a trial. Yep. Which all about clearing a verdict, and basically Clark Kent is basically, well, is a juror, which very interesting idea. I mean, he's basically like a teenager, because normally in real life they wouldn't do this, but apparently in this book, yeah, it's no problem. Yeah, Superboy 42, we have Superboy's Rivals. Yeah, it's some other people who appear in Smallville. We have Superboy Stowaway, where Superboy goes on a ship, goes a little traveling for one in a story because Superman would do this. And they have the Groucho Smallville. Basically, it's all about riding horses. It's like a rodeo issue, which is kind of weird. And then we have in 214 the return of Krypton Superdog. Yep, he is back. Yep. Okay. Yep, he's back here for this issue here, because why not? Catch criminals. And then we have issue 215, the super hobby of Superboy. Or basically, he just... Oh, what's the hobby, you might ask? He collects rocks. Yep, he's a rock collector. And he wants to show off to, well, other people. Then we have in Superboy 43, which is this the last issue? Yeah, this is the last one for Superboy. Where he's like going on a hunt for the opening story here. And then we have Superboy being a farmer for a story, because why not? And then we have a coach. Yes, Superboy's got a coach. And it's interesting. Then we have Superboy 16. That's in Superboy's Adventure Comics 216. Where you just have Superman and Superboy, where Superman is basically Superman is a lackey for Superboy, which is weird. It's a weirdish story, but it's a Silver Age, of course, fitted. But overall, pretty interesting book. And he meets up with Jimmy Olsen, a kid Jimmy Olsen, years before he meets up with the Alien Planet. Pretty good book overall. I give the book roughly a 9 out of 10. Next up we have is the Goon, which I collect for the Goon graphic novels, volumes 4 through 6. Me. Why is 4 through 6, may I ask? 4 is collect issues 9 and 13. 5 is 4 to 18. 6 is the Chinatown and Mystery of the Mr. Wicker. Mr. Wicker is basically a guy who is a brother of the Goon's, one of the Goon's love interest, who's covered himself in weird branches and looks like the Wicker Man from the one depicted in the British horror movie, The Wicker Man. And he dies, but he'll be sad by his spirit. It's a very cool issue. And mostly put, it's like, yeah, Goon just doing so, like beating up people up. But the Chinese Mr. Wicker, I heard a story about this one where, and Eric Powell had to take a year off to work on this one, and eventually he released it. And then pretty much right afterwards, book resumed, no problem. Yeah, no problem. But this book overall is awesome. Give the book roughly a 9 out of 10. Yep, so yeah, that's pretty much it for the video. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe to notifications. Next up is Jujutsu Kaisen. See you next video. Bye.